the mass blanket of the word or the phrasing cultural Marxists. Those of you guys that are here and alive, I'm sure a handful of you guys have been called cultural Marxists. I have been referred to as a cultural Marxist. I repeatedly went on record and said I am a pro-business, small business entrepreneur. You know what I mean? And like, I love Jesus. I love family values. I am for equality, and I'm for, you know, all these different things. And like that becomes the boogeyman term to define anybody that is with the sentiment that Black Lives Matter. Hey, we're just going to call you a cultural Marxist, cultural Marxist, cultural Marxist. And as I peeled away and I started doing my research, hey, gosh, am I promoting cultural Marxist ideals? You know what I discovered? There's actually nobody that identifies as a cultural Marxist. There's literally nobody. There's no cultural Marxist organization. There's no one that self-identifies as a cultural Marxist. Now, the founders of Black Lives Matter identify as Marxist from a political ideology. And so what's happened is we've taken a boogeyman term. The far right has taken this boogeyman term, combined two different things, which is political correctness, tolerance. We're familiar with this. Be tolerant to people who are different. You know, be tolerant to views that are different, so on and so forth. And they've taken those ideologies, which you'll find in a lot of liberal colleges and liberal schools and and then they've packaged like some people that have the leanings of Marxist economics, which I do not. And now anyone who says the sentiment Black Lives Matter, or who believes in social justice, or believes that there's an issue with mass incarceration in America, or believes, right, now is all lumped, or believes that Democrats aren't the only ones responsible for systemic racism, is all of a sudden a cultural Marxist. I think that's silly. I think it would be the equivalent of like, Ruslan, I'm a Christian man, and I live in California, I'm a Christian, and then you say, oh yeah, you're a California Christian. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Well, you know, you're a California Christian. You're one of those California Christians. Well, I am but don't define me as something I'm not self-identifying as. And then you start adding a bunch of stuff to the definition of what a California, or, you know, California Christians, you guys are very environmental and you're very this and you're very that. But I don't identify as a California Christian. I'm a Christian who lives in California. Why would you identify me as a California Christian? And now that becomes a boogeyman term to say, oh, it's us versus them. It's us real Christians versus California Christians. And California Christians, you guys are more liberal. And it's like, listen, no. I'm a Christian. Don't add a definition. So those folks that they want to be Marxists, which I disagree with. I don't think we should disrupt the nuclear family. I don't think we should overturn capitalism. Stop adding these goofy titles, and especially don't label me as a cultural Marxist, because I'm not a Marxist straight up. Like, I'm as, you know, almost as capitalist as you can get. So let me bring in some other people into this conversation. My brother Truth got his hand up, and then I'm gonna go to Bartholomew Jones. What y'all think about this whole like boogeymaning of cultural Marxists and just like throwing these terms around? I think it's goofy and very unhelpful. But what you think, Trutha?
I just think. And what I think a lot of people are getting at, and I just think it's poor communication. I think what a lot of people are saying, and I don't agree with this necessarily, is not that people are full-blown cultural Marxists, but I think what they're saying is culture is taking a lot of the teachings and kind of weaving it into a lot of these movements. And as a result, people are saying that the end result of it is going to be cultural Marxism becoming the more prevalent doctrine for everyone. And I think that's probably what they're getting at, but I don't think that they communicated well. And I'm not saying I agree with that, because I don't think that that is the case, but I think that's what, if you have long form conversations with some of these guys, it actually people who have a level of desire to actually understand the other side, I think what you get at is there's a fear that that's where things are leading towards.
Yeah, but can you even define what cultural Marxism is? Like, what do we, because Marxism is an economic view. It's similar to communism, right? Socialism, communism. Those people who are founders of Black Lives Matter, those people that are on the far left, they do identify as socialist, and some of them communist or Marxist. Right. What is the cultural what does that even mean? Like, what are they saying by that? That's why I can't get a clear definition from anybody on. You're calling me a cultural Marxist, but what does that even mean? Like, what is a cultural Marxist?
Yeah, I don't have a clear answer for that either. I think just based on what I've heard, basically anyone who is for like social justice based on the context of other factors, so like Black Lives Matter, the organization, what it probably original, like what the organization stands for as far as it being Marxism, they just throw a lot of baggage on things and just throw a lot of problematic things that people would be concerned about, because there was a whole movement back in the 70s, 80s about communism, and people were so afraid of communism. So they know that
Sure.
that's a buzz term that's going to get more conservative people to immediately dismiss things. So I think that's where it stems from, is a dismissal of these social movements. But it's no clear definition. I'm with you.
Yeah, it's what I think it is it's taking the issue of social justice, which historically, if we look at Martin Luther King and the people that have marched for it, has been led by Christians, right? And by the way, they called Martin Luther King a Marxist, right? And Martin Luther King was dismissed as a communist and as a Marxist. I don't know if you could substantiate that from his own mouth, but that did happen while he was alive. Martin Luther King was not liked while he was alive by conservatives, you know what I mean, by the majority of people. And then we packaged it on. And I think when I started researching cultural Marxism, this was a term that was coined by the far right in the 90s, right? And what it was they were upset about political correctness, which was huge in the 90s, which political correctness is like, hey, like, you can't use the N-word, like, you can't say the R-word, you can't just like lump people in, and anybody that isn't an assimilated white bread American, we're just going to use derogatory terms. That's kind of what political correctness is, which is like, to a certain degree, yeah, you should watch your mouth and not speak wild about people who are different than you. That's fair, but then it went to the extreme. Of like, now you can't say anything without it being dismissed as racism, right? Now you can't. And so I think that's where the phrase was coined: cultural Marxism, political correctness, postmodernism, there is no truth. And then it got lumped into, now anyone who says anything about a social issue, specifically regarding police brutality in America, you're making it up. It's not real. Black people are treated the best here than anywhere else in the world. White people are more likely to get shot by police than black people. Police are the ones that are really in danger, so on and so forth. And so now we've lumped it in. Let me bring in Bartholomew Jones, because I'm curious to hear from someone who is, I feel like, extremely family-oriented, entrepreneurial, a capitalist. I don't know if he minds me using that phrase to describe him, and is extremely anti-racism and anti-police brutality and everything that's packaged with that. Bart, have you experienced anybody calling you a cultural Marxist? Because I don't know, I literally get it like every other week. I get a DM from some conservative fan or some conservative friend. It's like, hey, bro, talking about Black Lives Matter, you're perpetuating cultural Marxism. What do you think, Bart?
I say you gotta work on that friends list, bro. You know what I mean? That unfriend button is a beast.
I'm talking about people in my real life. I'm talking about people that I like, my friends, like people I know in real life. I'm not even talking social media.
Dang, bro. We got to make a real life unfriend button. But I think, to me, bro, being called a cultural Marxist is the same thing as being called the N-word. To me.
Okay.
It's okay. So when you look at I'm not gonna say the word because I don't want to mess up your algorithm, right? But when you, even with the A on it, you know what I mean? Like, but the point is, when you look at the meaning of that word, mm-hmm. It was a word that generally just meant a stupid person, right?
Right.
It was turned into meaning any black person, right? Mm-hmm. And so you take a word that doesn't actually refer to a specific ethnic group. It is just a general term. And then you give it a specific nuance for a certain group of people that group of people does not define for themselves, mm-hmm. right? And so when you do that, then you essentially put those people in a position where they have to negotiate on terms they cannot set. So now I'm arguing with someone about a thing that I never identified as, right, that they made up for me.
Right.
Right. And so being in a position where I and my friends have been called N-words, and you ever try to engage with that person to explain to them that you're not that, mm-hmm. it's a losing. You can never win that argument because they're the ones creating the definition for the word. They can change it whenever they want. There's no agreed upon term. If you try to go to the dictionary definition, that doesn't work. And so they just continually change the term because the point is it's a slur. It's meant to hurt you. Mm-hmm. It's not meant to help you. So there's no way to use that word and then help yourself from it, which is why a lot of people argue you should divest from the term in general. Same thing is true with cultural Marxists. Culture is a word. Marxism is a word. Mm-hmm. I was a sociology student in college, so mm-hmm. I studied Marxism. Mm-hmm. However, cultural Marxist is not a thing. That's like if I took two terms that might generally apply to a conservative Christian. And if I called them a fundamental evangelical neo-zeitgeist and threw a whole bunch of words together and said, see, because you all have taken the focus on the family ideology that's permeated conservative Christian neo-patriarchal society.
Right, you're just saying a bunch of stuff.
You all are now pushing the evangelical fundamental neo-zeitgeistism agenda.
Sure.
How could you respond to that? Because I'm making stuff up while I'm talking. There's no way you can even defend yourself to those claims,
right?
Because I'm putting a title on you that I just made up.
Yep.
In order to just basically say your opinion doesn't matter. Let's not engage with the reality of the fact of what you're saying. I'm just going to slur you real quick. Slur.
Yep.
Slur. Right.
Yep.
I'm going to slur you real quick and then ignore your perspective. And I think that's the point. I think there's another point here that people don't realize. Traditionally, the powers that be in America and in general in colonialism or in the West have ignored or shunned people of color.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is, if you're a person of color who's seeking to gain resources, the powers that society deems as positive, good, will not provide those resources to you.
Mm-hmm.
So then, to use a sociological term, you have to engage in deviant behavior to get basic resources for life. Deviant meaning different from the societally approved systems or powers or structures. Because I have to go over here. Hence, a great example would be the drug game, right? People are trying to get resources to provide for themselves. They're being blocked out of jobs. Their factories leave their towns, white flight, X, Y, and Z. I need money. This provides money. Now I have to engage in the deviant behavior, not because I have deviant values.
Yes. I
actually have the same values as everyone else in our community, but I'm not allowed to access the resources everyone else is. So I have to go into this other community, this deviant community, to access resources. So I'm being real simple. I'm not trying to get too complex. So the point is, in fact, even though there is no such thing as a cultural Marxist, many Marxists have been way nicer and kinder and more loving and giving to people of color than conservative capitalist Christians ever were. So really, if we're going to create a slur based on actions, the slur would be the people who were doing the negative things, right? And not these people in this specific case who were being very helpful. Does that justify the activity of this particular deviant group at all times? No. Again, drug dealing example. Just because some people are forced to sell drugs doesn't mean all people who sell drugs are doing something nice or kind or even doing something because they have to. Some people are doing things like they want to.
Yeah.
The example goes back to communism. You've experienced negative communism or the negative effects of that, right? However, it's also true that many Black power activists or people who were seeking to liberate themselves only found resources, education, funding, so on and so forth from communists or from communist countries. And at the same time, the capitalist countries were funding the war on drugs in communities that were trying to free themselves by using the same communists who were helping Black Americans. So those Latinos in Central America who were seeking to free themselves from colonial powers only got help from communists.
Right.
The U.S. didn't care because we were aligned with the colonial powers. Those same communist powers also were interested in helping liberate African Americans. Now, the issue is the strategy they wanted to use, I think, ultimately doesn't work. But the point is they were willing to help in the process. So
just about, because you went deep into the war on drugs, which conservatives never like to talk about. Nobody ever wants to talk about the war on drugs. Nobody ever wants to talk about how policies by Reagan, before Reagan, who helped get Reagan elected? Jerry Falwell, who pushed the whole religious right. You guys can see my video about that. Help Reagan get elected. All of a sudden, abortion became a hot topic issue. These are the same policies and how harsh they were on the war on drugs, which, to be fair, there were Democrats and Black people who thought that those were good solutions at the time, ended up having horrible effects on the Black community throughout the 80s and the 90s because of how harsh. And even the Breonna Taylor situation could be traced back. I was watching the Hodge twins, who were conservative talking heads, and they were like, why do they go into Breonna Taylor's house like it was Osama bin Laden? Because of the war on drugs, because these guys are going in for a basic search warrant to try and find drugs, but they're barging in there like they're taking out a terrorist. That is a direct byproduct for how harsh people came down from the war on drugs. And a lot of this stuff is systemic, right? So Bart, let me ask you this. So, and just to be clear, listen to what Bart said. Bart said, we received help from communists, even though their solutions aren't the best solutions when we're talking economic policies, meaning that communism isn't the ideal solution.
Listen, bro. Listen, this is like, I grew up in the hood, so it's like you're getting jumped.
Mm-hmm.
The only people who want to help you, I know my brother Milan's in the chat, the only people who are down to help you not get jumped are your family members who are affiliated.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Now, you don't want to join the gang, but you also don't want to get jumped. So now you are in what we commonly call in the deli business a pickle. You're in a pickle, right? And so you're in a kosher pickle. You're in a dill pickle.
Yes.
And you have to figure out what's the best deal in this dill pickle.
Yes.
Get jumped and stay unaffiliated.
Yes.
Or try to get help and survive and then negotiate what happens afterwards. But then what happens? This is why when Kendrick says Democrats and Republicans, he's so right. Because literally, once the people who helped you not get jumped move on, all the people who were trying to jump you now not only want your money, now they also say you're in that gang. Which is literally what conservatives do. They're like, oh, we were trying to beat you up. You guys got held by the Marxists. We couldn't rob you, jack your money, plunder your community. Now you're a Marxist. So this is now justifying the thing we were going to do anyway.
Right. Yeah, and that's good. And so that's a very good point. A lot of people aren't gonna critically think through that, right? And or even have the capacity to put themselves in that type of situation just because that wasn't their upbringing, right? I remember being jumped. I remember growing up in San Diego and getting I've been jumped before. It's not pleasant, right? And I remember, being in a pickle at times. And I think that's important. I think it's also important that a lot of what we're experiencing, just from a social media information age, guys, is what's happening. And even in our education system, a lot of what's happening is you're being told what to think. You're being told what to think, and you're thinking that is education. Education is supposed to teach you how to think. It's supposed to teach you how to critically process variables and understand the different situations, the different perspectives. A lot of what's happening is you're just being told exactly what to think, and you're being indoctrinated either in conservative, viewpoints without factoring in the counterpoints, or in liberal viewpoints without factoring in the counterpoints. And so people are being indoctrinated and not critically thinking through what Bart is describing. Go ahead.
Peep this. I grew up conservative. I'm gonna be honest, probably most black people grew up conservative, right? Especially if you grew up in the South. I grew up conservative. So growing up conservative, my family told me, in general, you get this idea that being liberal is bad, right? But we also grew up respecting and honoring Dr. King. Mm-hmm. When you go to college, you realize, oh, Dr. King was pretty liberal, especially theologically. Mm-hmm. Then people tell you, conservatives will tell you, white conservatives mostly, will tell you, hey, this is why Dr. King's theology isn't correct. This is why we can't really listen to anything he said or read his books or his.
Because they just dismiss everything.
Yeah, because he was liberal, right? Again, a slur.
Yep.
But then when you say, well, why was he liberal?
Mm-hmm. Talk about it.
Well, Dr. King, like most black people, grew up conservative and tried to go to a conservative Bible college. And the conservatives who are posturing themselves as virtuous denied him entrance. So the only people is, I'm telling you in that game, that pickle where you get jumped. Now I don't have an opportunity to get an education. I'm extremely intelligent. God has gifted me beyond a lot of people on the planet. I want to do something to help, to follow the conservative Bible I grew up reading. But now I can't, because the people who are supposed to be kind and good and loving are not. Well, who's going to accept me? The Marxist liberal colleges.
Yep.
So that's where he gets an education. So it's crazy to me for someone to say, oh, those people are liberal, therefore they're Marxist, therefore they're wrong, when many of us have tried to pursue conservative resources and been denied simply on the basis of our skin color.
Well, but Bart, I think it's also important to note that, look, you are a conservative when it comes to your family.
Yeah.
You're conservative when it comes to your theology.
A wife.
You got 2 kids and a wife. You're conservative when it comes to your family. You're conservative when it comes to your theology. I I would beg that you probably wouldn't identify this. I would beg and say that you're conservative fiscally, that you hold fiscal conservative views.
I'm trying to be more conservative, you know what I mean?
And so that's the issue, is that you meet a lot of people from the hood, or black people or Hispanic people, and they hold conservative values. Like,
bro, I went to the conservative college when I told this is the Harvard of Christian colleges. I went there on a scholarship. And when I went there, guess what I experienced? Tons of racism. And guess who were the people who were like, yo, that's wrong, we got you. All the liberal sociological, which is why I studied with them, because I was like, maybe y'all can help me explain why these people who read the same Bible I'm reading aren't treating me the way the Bible says they should be treating me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's literally gangbanging, bro. It's just that's what it is. Like people just want to get you if they get you just because they find you slipping, or they get you because you got help from the other side, right? But we just want to live. That's why I don't call myself conservative. I don't call myself liberal. I love the term you created, agnostic, because it's like the get out of jail free card. Right. All this gangbanging going on. I don't care about these ideologies.
Right.
Me and my family just want to follow the scriptures, love Yeshua, and love people like he loves us.
Amen.
That's it. I don't care about none of these titles. These titles exist for, I guess, people who find it politically beneficial. Right. Me and my family just trying to follow the scriptures and live and help other people do the same.
Amen. Amen. I think your point about how the indoctrination happens, paralleling that to gangbanging, is brilliant. I think it's so brilliant, and I think so many people miss it. And so many people just maybe personally don't have the capacity to understand what that experience is like on a very tangible level, like you're talking about, and then scaled up. And so I think it's so good that you pointed that out. Let me bring in a couple more people, get some different perspectives on this. Bart, stick around, because I think you got some good stuff. I'm going to Sam. You got your hand up, champ. Hashtag politically agnostic, indeed. What you think, bro? Sam Alcott.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really necessarily add to a lot of what Bart said. I think everything he said was great. I was just going to clarify what I think people mean by cultural Marxism, and it's not a term that I use. Like, I kind of think it's kind of dumb. Yeah. But Marxism obviously is like this economic term that is. I mean, that's all it is, and because capitalism is sort of seen as like this staple of the West, like. Marxism is inherently in contradiction to that. So when somebody calls you a cultural Marxist, they're saying that you are trying to overturn Western culture and sort of degrade it. And so when you are talking about Black Lives Matter or whatever, and people are in your mentions and calling you a cultural Marxist, I assume they're probably talking about the organization Black Lives Matter, and I know that you are not in support of that, and you're in support of the sentiment, which why people can't grasp that as a concept is really confusing. But I just wanted to say I think that's what people are getting at, which again, it's not a term I use. I think it's dumb, but I think that's what people are saying. You're trying to degrade the current Judeo-Christian Western norms.
Yeah, and shout out to Will Perdue. Doesn't Western culture need a wake-up call? Yeah, I mean, I think if we're going to talk about Judeo-Christian norms, however, there are things about not the views, because I do feel like Jewish people tend to be extremely more empathetic to the plight of people who are been oppressed, right? Because they've been oppressed. But I think what I really think this deviated, and this is just my opinion, is I think, and I did a whole video about this, is when the religious right started, and all of a sudden conservative views became exclusive to Republican Party. This is the late 70s. You guys should go all watch this with Jerry Falwell and how that religious right started. It started out of, they initially wanted to maintain segregation. Then they realized that they couldn't because the country had moved on. So then they found another issue, and that issue became abortion. And then they packaged that to the Republican Party. And I think once we crossed that line, because remember, there was Catholics were Democrats, right? Prior to this, there was all kinds of intermingling. but all of a sudden Christian became synonymous with Republican, and then that's when it all kind of like got repackaged and rebranded under the Reagan administration. I really think that's where this stuff went left, because I think if you look at Christianity around the time of the 60s and in the early 70s, there was a wide variety of views of Christians that wanted to that did walk with Dr. King, of Jewish people that walk with Dr. King. So even when we say Judeo-Christian views, I don't want to disrupt those views. Obviously, I don't want to disrupt the nuclear family, which is what people always go back to. Have you read the Black Lives Matter website? Yes, I've read it. I've read it dozens of times. I've read all their values over and over, right? Yes, I've read it. We're not talking about disrupting the nuclear family. We're talking about all the other things that come as a byproduct of Western evangelical views, where you discard a group of people as disposable, basically, and you have people that are looking out from the Christian side and the Christian side. Hey, this isn't right. We need to do better. We need to love those that are oppressed. We need to love those that are mistreated. So I think that's a good point, and thank you for clarifying that. But again, I do think that it is it's just unfortunate, man. Let me bring somebody else in. Let's see. Truther, you got your hand up, champ. I'm gonna pin you up, and then we're gonna move on here shortly. But I think this is a good discussion. Go ahead, Truther.
No, I'm good. Pretty much everything was already said.
Fair enough. Anybody else want to chime in before we move on?
One more thing.
Hold on.
Yeah, you got it.
Hold on. Let me go to AJ. AJ had his hand up. Let me go to AJ. Go ahead, AJ.
Yeah, for sure. No, I just wanted to say that I think, and I have a lot of conservative friends, and I think there's this sense of they want to believe. I say they as it's like, oh, these people out here somewhere, but my friends, they want to believe that there's this secret war going on or something that's like it's traditional good values versus evil Marxism, etc. And so whenever something happens, to say like there's a George Floyd or a Breonna Taylor or an Elijah McCain or Jacob Blake, they say, oh, look, BLM is destroying businesses. BLM is evil and taking away all these. They want to take away your rights. You know, they want to destroy capitalism. Kind of builds up a villain, so to speak, so that they can be the hero, and not just be the hero, but also have like special knowledge, like, oh, you shouldn't get a vaccination because there's parts from aborted fetuses inside or whatever, like something like that. And it's like, I've got special knowledge. I want to enlighten you so that you're not a sheep and so you're not.
Yeah, and there's so much ego and toxicity attached to that. If you find yourself like talking to someone like that, I just like, listen, man, you go ahead, but there's so much like ego attached to that, like that special knowledge thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, and if it comes from, it's tough because when it's your pastor that you've looked up to for so long and you're like 15, 16, 17, of course you're going to believe what they're saying, and of course you're going to think that you've got inside knowledge or whatever, because it's like, yeah, that person's such a great spiritual leader. Of course. BLM must be evil. Every person that says Black Lives Matter must be associated with BLM, and they're secretly supporting cultural Marxism. You know, so it's like, it's tough, and I don't exactly know how to get through to those individuals, because like I love them and I've been part of their lives for so long. Yep. But sometimes I don't even know if it's worth trying to convince them otherwise. You know what I mean?
Yep, that's good. That's good. Now I feel you, man. Let me pin up. Hold on. Who else have their hand up? We do gotta move on. So if you could throw in your hand up, keep your thoughts brief. Prophet Link, please keep your thoughts brief. No Face, I see you, bro. Go ahead, bro.
Got you.
Yeah.
So,
sorry. Go ahead.
So just quick plug. Two of the best interviews I've seen that really helped me in my political views, because I felt like all my life I kind of was never here nor there, kind of stuck in between trying to figure it out. There's a lot of other outlying issues with that, but anyway, was one, the KB interview. Quick plug for the homie Ruslan. That KB interview, when he describes that, you know, as believers, right? For the believers on here, if you're not a believer, try Jesus. Anyway, we are kingdom first, right?
Mhm.
We operate under kingdom rule and kingdom authority first and foremost over everything. And then you elaborated really well when you talk about, you know, your views are going to switch. You're never going to formulate and be able to be on one specific side.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm conservative in this. I might be liberal in that issue, and so on and so forth, right? The other interview that really, really blessed me was with the truth.
Mhm.
He did like a whole, I think it was like a whole hour long. I'll drop it in the comments when I find it. But he was talking about just how we view others
Mhm.
and how, as believers, it's a dangerous place when you are picking sides, but our vocabulary, our definitions aren't even unilateral. An example he uses like radical Islam, not Muslims, radical Islam, right? They're literally fighting for peace,
Mhm.
and so is the Christian. But we don't mean the same thing when we say peace. They
Mhm.
mean subjugation. Like, I'm going to subject you to follow Islam. If you don't, I'm going to kill and slaughter your people, right? That's radical Islam, with martyrdom and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
they're just two really big interviews on that point that
Gotcha.
really blessed me, that helped shape my views. And I'm more politically agnostic than anything.
Amen. Amen. All right, let me go to No Face Rapper. Let's go ahead, boss. I don't want to get too deep into the
I'll keep it
weeds.
short.
Go
I
ahead.
think it's just I think it's very important also that we understand, you know, like I think you brought it up earlier, Ruslan, about the education. Like the education system doesn't highlight everyone. You know, they say America is a melting pot, but all of the heroes in our history books are white. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you know what I'm saying? A lot of people, the way they view America, they view it because they don't understand other contributions from other peoples, from other cultures. So it's very important that system changes, and also if it doesn't change, that we self-educate and learn about other contributions from other cultures in this country.
That's good. That's good. Let me bring it back to Bartholomew, and then we're going to move on. And I do have an idea I want to bring to you guys in a second. Wait, did Bartholomew bounce? No, he's right there. All right. Go ahead, boss.
Yeah, I wanted to say the last thing. I feel like maybe because I have a sociology background, it might help with even the Black Lives Matters website. Like, I remember when Black Lives Matter started.
Mhm.
I'm gonna make this short. Keep it short. The point is, Black Lives Matter is using a lot of sociological theory to help explain and find solutions for problems in the Black community.
Mhm.
So when people read these terms and they don't know the academic meaning behind something like disrupt the nuclear family, it sounds scary. And I'm not even here to co-sign it because, like I said, I'm not gangbanging. But what I am saying is that what they're referring to is the fact that many Christians have not done what the Bible says, which is to love the orphan and the widow.
Mhm.
And so they're saying they want there to be space for people who don't have nuclear or regular families,
Mhm.
which a lot of people in Black, a lot of single mother households. A lot of kids grew up with no parents or with their grandparents, or people have grandparents in the home plus the parents, auntie, uncle.
Mhm.
They're just saying they want to make those things okay too. They
Mhm.
mean other things with that as well, but
Mhm.
that's the part of that sentence that I can say I understand what they mean, because that's a part of the sociological conversation about the hegemony of the nuclear family.
Yeah, but do you think, just to push back a little bit, Bart, I think one of the things where they do take an L is when you use words like disrupt, right? Words like disrupt, defund, and abolish are just
Yeah,
poor.
saying
I'm not
that-
saying you're co-signing it. I'm saying they're taking a massive L in the poor branding of it. When you start saying
Right.
disrupt
saying
the
is-
nuclear family or abolish police, right? And when we talk about like abolish police, we go look at what happened in Camden, New Jersey, which is the only place that's been executed amazingly. They abolished the local police department, had the sheriff step in, rehired all the police officers. Murder rate went down, crime went down, businesses went up. That was abolishing the police, but they didn't get rid of. You know what I'm saying? Like they didn't we're not having police anymore. But I think some of the branding with the way Black Lives Matter or whoever's a part of this stuff is using the language, it's just like, bruh, like take a marketing class. Don't nobody want to hear abolish police. You crazy? Abolish police? No, we could rethink police. We need to refund police. Abolish, disrupt the nuclear family? Bruh, you bugging.
That's sociological language. That's is nuanced within that tribe, basically.
Yeah,
is
but
saying-
you got it. But if you want to win people over to your argument, like Martin Luther King did, like other people have, you have to communicate in terms where everybody can
I think
understand.
that's an L they take. All I'm saying is because I'm watching this thing form,
Yeah.
I have homies who were on the ground in Ferguson because we graduated in 2012, 2013. When Ferguson pops off, a lot of my racial reconciliation homies is on the ground hitting me up like, yo, can I get money? Because we don't have a job and we're protesting for months at a time. So when this thing is forming during the Ferguson movement, like they're building their website then. So they're in the midst of literally a war zone, pulling stuff from, these are kids just out of college, you know what I mean? I'm trying to take stuff from sociology class and make a solution for issues. And I think the reason why they're in that position, honestly, is because the church was absent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the church took a massive L on that side because we should have been on the forefront of it. And let's not cap. All y'all Christians that are like, of course Black Lives Matter. Y'all was not saying that in 2014 with Trayvon Martin. It was a knee-jerk reaction. What do you mean? All lives matter. What do you mean? No, y'all was capping and y'all was scared because you felt threatened when somebody said all Black Lives Matter. So the response was, no, all lives matter. The response was Blue Lives Matter because you didn't quite understand what was being said. Those were not organizations that were formed in and of themselves in silos. Blue Lives Matter is literally a response to Black Lives Matter because they don't get what they're trying to say. So you're 100% right. And the church took a massive L on this joint because we should have been on the front lines. We should have been aware of what was going on. We should have been looking at a Trayvon Martin case and be like, no, that's just not right. That's not right. What happened is not right. Breonna Taylor, listen, we can get into the logistics of, was it a no-knock warrant? Was it a no-knock warrant? Did they knock? Three plainclothes police officers show up to someone's house at midnight, bang on the door. Let's just say they announced themselves. Let's just say they did. Maybe the boyfriend didn't hear. Somebody bang on my door at midnight, I'm pulling the strap. 50 Cent, get the strap. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So then you say, well, he shot first. He did shoot first. And you know what happened? All the charges were dropped. So he shoots first, they shoot back, she gets killed. Listen, as a gun owner, as a registered Second Amendment as a gun owner, I'm responsible for every bullet that comes out of my gun. That's basic 101. Basic 101. Somebody should be held responsible for that. But no, we want to get into the minutia of, you know how hard it is to get a no-knock warrant. So they got a no-knock warrant because she was dating a dude back in January that kept showing up to her crib, and that justified them getting. Somebody dropped the ball. I'm not saying those cops were racist in that moment. What I'm saying, if this was an upper-class white woman in a different neighborhood, really hard to justify that this would have went down the same way. And then we get into altering paperwork, making it look like they executed the warrant on her house at the same time that the other dude was in suspect, her ex-boyfriend, when it shows that he was already in custody, and they alter documents. Why alter documents if you did everything by the book? And when this comes out by the FBI, and the FBI says, hey, just like they found in Ferguson, Missouri, history of racist policing, all y'all Blue Lives Matter people, I want that same energy. That same energy should be maintained when there's corruption in this specific department. I don't know if there is, but goodness gracious, there seems to be a lot of very questionable behavior.
Only listen to one witness. There were like a dozen witnesses who said they didn't hear anything. So why would they pick the one out of like 10 witnesses who said they did? That's kind of wild to me.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, man. And by the way, I watched the Hodge twins today. Pretty conservative. They're two mixed black twins on. I know them from the fitness world. They did a video, and I thought it was the first time I heard a conservative talking head do a reasonable breakdown of the Breonna Taylor stuff, and they missed a lot of stuff. Like they glanced over the fact that they were plainclothes, which is again like, why are you going as a plainclothes police officer to execute a search? Like I don't understand that.
In the hood.
Yeah.
I stay in the hood to do ministry. Yeah. If you put us up 12 o'clock, we pulling out both straps. You could be capping. Why would I believe you? Yeah. People get robbed all the time. Like okay, so then I'm gonna bust in your house and say I'm the police. You gonna believe me? Right.
Yeah. I think people seldom put this stuff in its proper context and factor in all the variables. But Bart, thank you.
Kingstream Entertainment. Ruslan.